The first time my CEO asked me why I wasn't dating, it wasn't a joke, and it wasn't office gossip. It was worse than that. It was quiet, personal, like she'd been watching the way I moved through the world like a man carrying invisible bruises. We were standing near the glass wall of the executive floor, the city lights of Chicago, Illinois flickering below like 1,000 tiny lives moving forward, while mine felt stuck in one long unfinished night. When she looked at me, her voice was soft, but it hit like thunder. "What's stopping you from dating?" And when I answered, I watched something inside her face break, like she hadn't expected the truth to sound so painful. Before we go deeper into this story, I just want to ask you something from the heart. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and people healing even after life breaks them, then please take 1 second to like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and at 28, I looked like someone who had everything figured out. I worked as an executive assistant at one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the Midwest, Sterling and Wren Innovations. I wore tailored suits, kept perfect schedules, and handled crises before they became disasters. People thought I was confident because I spoke carefully and stayed calm under pressure. But the truth was, calm was just the mask I learned to wear. If you grow up in a home where yelling is normal and silence is dangerous, you become an expert at reading the air. You learn to predict storms before they arrive, and you learn how to survive by not needing anything from anyone. My CEO was Grace Whitmore. She was 35, brilliant and intimidating in the way real leaders are. Like she could see through your excuses and your fears in the same glance. Her office smelled faintly of black coffee and expensive paper, and her eyes carried the kind of focus that made people straighten their backs without realizing it. She wasn't the kind of boss who asked about your weekend just to be polite. She asked because she wanted the truth. She wanted the real story. And that was exactly what terrified me. For months, she noticed things most people ignored. She noticed I never joined coworkers for drinks, that I always left exactly on time, never staying late unless it was necessary, that I flinched when someone raised their voice, even if they were laughing, that I never spoke about family. And most of all, she noticed that whenever a coworker tried to set me up on a date, I smiled like it was funny, then stepped away like the idea physically hurt. That night on the executive floor, the city outside the glass looked like freedom. The building was quiet, and the day had been brutal. A major investor had threatened to pull out, a product launch was delayed, and Grace had been fighting pressure from the board like a soldier refusing to retreat. I had stayed steady all day, keeping her meetings aligned, shielding her from chaos, handing her solutions like weapons. When it finally ended, I expected her to dismiss me. Instead, she stayed near the window, arms crossed, and asked that question like it had been sitting on her tongue for weeks. I didn't want to answer. I tried to laugh it off the way I always did. I tried to say something light, something safe, but Grace didn't move. Her eyes didn't soften into politeness. They sharpened into concern. And suddenly, the air felt too thin to breathe in. So I told her the truth. I told her I wasn't stopping myself from dating because I was busy. I wasn't scared of commitment. I wasn't waiting for the right person. I told her the real reason was that I didn't trust myself to be loved without ruining it. I told her that love, to me, didn't feel like comfort. It felt like a trap, like something that always started sweet and ended with you begging for it to stop. I told her about my mother, Rachel Caldwell, who used to hum hymns while washing dishes, trying to pretend our home wasn't falling apart. I told her about my father, Vernon, whose anger filled rooms faster than oxygen. I told her how I grew up watching love turn into bruises and apologies, over and over. I told her that when my mom finally left, she didn't take me with her at first, because she had nowhere to go. I stayed behind with a man who didn't want me, who looked at me like I was the reason his life went wrong. And then I told Grace the part I never told anyone. I told her that when I was 19, I met a girl named Hannah Pierce. She had a laugh that sounded like sunlight and freckles across her nose like God had kissed her gently. She believed in me. She used to say I was safe, that I was different, that I would never be like him, and I wanted to believe her more than I wanted air. But trauma is a quiet poison. It doesn't always turn you into a monster. Sometimes it turns you into someone who runs before love has the chance to leave first. I pushed Hannah away in 100 small ways. I got jealous when she had friends. I went cold when she needed comfort. I kept secrets because I didn't know how to share pain without feeling weak. And one night, after a stupid argument, she cried and said she didn't recognize me anymore. She asked me why I was punishing her for things she didn't do. 2 weeks later, she died. A car accident on a rainy road outside Rockford. A drunk driver. One moment she was alive, and the next moment the world was empty in a way I still can't describe. I never got to apologize, never got to tell her I was trying, never got to fix what I broke. All I had left was guilt that felt like a chain around my ribs. So when Grace asked what was stopping me from dating, I told her the truth. I told her I didn't date because the last person who loved me died thinking I didn't love her enough. And I didn't know how to survive another loss like that. When I finished, the room was silent. The city lights flickered. Somewhere below, sirens moved like distant ghosts. Grace's face had changed. Not into pity. Grace didn't do pity. It changed into something raw, something wounded, like my words had reached inside her and grabbed a memory she'd been trying to bury. She didn't speak for a long moment, then she looked away, blinking hard. Her hand rose to her chest like she was steadying herself. And that's when I realized my answer didn't just surprise her. It hurt her. In the weeks that followed, she treated me differently. Not with distance, but with a strange gentleness I didn't know how to accept. She stopped scheduling late meetings for no reason. She asked if I'd eaten. She started sending me home early sometimes with a simple line like, "You've done enough today." It felt unnatural, like standing in sunlight after living in a basement for years. One evening, she asked me to attend a company charity gala with her, not as her assistant, as her guest. I almost refused. My stomach twisted with the fear of being seen, but something in her expression told me this wasn't about appearances. It was about pulling me back into the world. At the gala, surrounded by polished people and expensive smiles, I felt like an imposter in my own skin. Grace stood beside me like a quiet shield, introducing me not as staff, but as someone valuable, and for the first time in a long time, I felt my shoulders relax, just slightly. Later that night, while the room danced around us in soft music and glittering lights, Grace told me her own truth without me asking. She told me she had once been engaged to a man named Caleb Morrison, a man the world adored. He was charming, generous, and cruel in ways nobody saw. She told me she stayed too long because she thought suffering was the price of loyalty. And when she finally left, she built her company like a fortress. Success as armor, leadership as a wall, never letting anyone close enough to hurt her again. I didn't say much. I didn't know what to say. But I understood her in a way I didn't expect. 2 different lives, 2 different scars, but the same survival instinct. Don't need anyone, and you can't be abandoned. From that point, something shifted between us. Not romance at first, not even friendship in the usual sense. It was deeper. It was 2 broken people learning how to be human again in the same room. Grace started recommending books about healing. I started going to therapy, quietly, without telling anyone at work. Some days I'd sit in my car after sessions and cry until my chest hurt, because I didn't realize how much grief I'd swallowed without chewing. Some nights I'd wake up sweating from dreams of Hannah's voice fading into silence. And Grace began to soften too. She started laughing more. She stopped living only for work. She began letting people in, little by little. It was like watching a locked door finally open, just a crack, and light spilling through. One winter evening, I stayed late to help her prepare for a board presentation. Snow fell outside like feathers, coating the streets in white. The office was empty. The world felt hushed. Grace sat across from me at the long conference table studying numbers. Then she looked up and said something I'll never forget. She said she used to think broken people were dangerous. Now she believed broken people were often the ones who loved the hardest, because they knew what it cost to lose. That night I realized something terrifying. I had started to care about her, not in a professional way, not in a polite way, in a way that made my chest tighten when she looked tired, in a way that made me want to protect her peace, in a way that scared me because love always felt like the beginning of grief. Months passed. The company thrived. I healed slowly, not perfectly. Healing isn't a straight road, it's a messy staircase. Some days you climb, some days you fall and sit there in the dark, ashamed. But Grace never made me feel ashamed. She never tried to fix me like I was a project. She simply stayed consistent, like kindness with a backbone. Then one night, after a long day, she walked with me to the elevator and asked again, softer than before, almost trembling. She asked if I still believed I didn't deserve to be loved. I didn't know how to answer. My throat burned. The old guilt rose up like a tide. But I thought of therapy. I thought of Hannah. I thought of Grace's quiet support. I thought of how I had survived even after believing I couldn't. So I told her the truth again. I told her I didn't know if I deserved love, but I knew I wanted to learn. I told her I was tired of punishing myself forever. I told her I didn't want my past to keep stealing my future. Grace's eyes filled with tears, and she didn't hide them. She nodded slowly like she'd been holding her breath for years. And in that moment I realized my answer didn't just break her heart back then, it woke it up. Because she wasn't heartbroken for me alone. She was heartbroken because she saw herself. Near the end of that year, I visited Hannah's grave for the first time in almost a decade. The wind was sharp, the sky gray, and the cemetery quiet. I stood there with shaking hands and whispered an apology I'd been carrying like a stone. I told her I was sorry for running, sorry for being afraid, sorry for not knowing how to love her the way she deserved. Then I told her something else, something I never thought I'd say. I told her I was trying again. I left a small bouquet of white roses and walked away feeling like I had finally set down a burden I wasn't meant to carry forever. And when I returned to the city, Grace was waiting at the office late, finishing paperwork. She looked up at me like she already knew something had changed. Maybe love doesn't replace grief. Maybe it doesn't erase the past. But maybe love is what gives pain a place to rest. Maybe love is what turns survival into living. If this story is touching your heart right now, please don't just watch silently. Like the video, subscribe, and share it, because stories like this remind people they're not alone, and your engagement helps this message reach someone who might be struggling in silence. And before the ending, I have one special request from you. Comment below the words, "I choose healing," if you believe broken hearts can still learn to love again. Because the truth is, Grace didn't fall in love with a perfect man. She fell in love with a man who finally stopped running from his own heart. And I didn't fall for a flawless CEO. I fell for a woman strong enough to lead an empire, yet brave enough to cry when something mattered. That day she asked me what was stopping me from dating. I thought she was just curious. I didn't know she was asking because she was searching too. Searching for proof that healing was possible. Searching for a reason to believe that love didn't always end in pain. And when I answered her honestly, it broke her heart. But not in the way heartbreak destroys you. It broke her heart open. And sometimes, that's exactly how God lets the light back in.